Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. As an evolving spirit and change adventure navigator, it is Kate's mission to empower and guide you on your path and inspire your truest passions. She will encourage you to share your gifts, speak your truth, and ignite your inner wisdom and purpose. She hopes to do so with a little humor and grace, and her own soulfire passion. Kate talks with amazing guests who have embraced the pursuit and are fanning the flames of their own passion, purpose, and soulfire wisdom. Now here's your host, Kate.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Soulfire Wisdom and Tips, Tricks, and Triumphs Tuesday. So if this is your first time listening, I'm a hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, Reiki master, and a life coach. But I like to call myself a change adventure navigator because I love guiding clients through obstacles and adversity to find their path, purpose, and peace. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about habits and actually about creating positive habits because this morning, actually, I started a new positive habit of my own. Since I moved, I live in Southern Arizona, and on the house that I bought, I have this beautiful Ramada that faces the mountains. And my plan has been to go out there every morning and have my coffee and, look at the mountains, kind of relaxing early morning retreat, and then go for a morning walk. But being a natural night person, I've been here coming up on 10 months and I haven't done that yet. So this morning, I started my new habit. I had a lovely cup of coffee sitting out on my Ramada, and then I went for a brief morning walk. And actually right now, our temperatures are getting up to about 109, 110, even 112. So early morning is about the only time it's really comfortable to go for a walk. So I think I've told you before that rather than changing bad habits, I believe in creating good habits. So I'll let you know in 3 to 6 weeks how my new habit is going. And that's my triumph, actually, for today, starting my new habit. We have a great show planned for today. My guests are Vic Compher and Rodney Wittenberg, and they are co-producers of the documentary film Angels and Saints, Eros and Awe, an impactful commentary on the struggles and controversy between spirituality and sexuality. Vic Compher is a filmmaker, licensed clinical social worker, workshop trainer, and author. And his most recent film is Portraits of Professional Caregivers, Their Passion, Their Pain, which addresses secondary trauma and staff resiliency. Caregivers film was nominated for the Regional Emmy for Outstanding Documentary in 2018. And Rodney Wittenberg is the founder of Melody Vision, producer, cameraman, composer, and editor. As an Emmy award-winning modern Renaissance man, his interests and professional endeavors are broad-ranging, from full-length film production to music composition. He's fascinated by what makes things tick and how to creatively intersect with them, whether it's the inner workings of his client's vision or new ways to use the latest technical advances. So I'm really excited to have both of them here today. Hi, Vic.
Hello there. Nice to
Hi,
meet you.
Rodney.
Hello. Very nice to be here.
So can you both just give us a little bit more information on your background and what really led you to your current path? Can you start, Vic?
Sure. Well, much of my background has been in social work. As you mentioned, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've worked in several areas in counseling, in work with children and families, child protective services. I worked in hospice, geriatric social work, and I've done a lot of training and workshops. But as I advanced in my life, my age in particular, I began to realize that as much as I enjoy documenting things, and I've done a fair amount of writing where I'll document things in writing, stories and books and various things, but I'm also a very visual person. And I felt like at that stage of my life, I wanted to document in an artistic visual way. And so I started getting into filmmaking, and the films also come out of the social work experience and background. So they have social themes. They're often themes about trauma, but also resilience and ways of transforming that sorrow or that assault in one's life, whatever that might be in whatever form, into something creative and meaningful. So this is the fifth film that I have produced, and this one and the one before, called Caregivers, or the Portraits of Professional Caregivers, is a film that Rodney and I have done together. So we've been working very closely for some 8 years or so. This is our second film, Angels and Saints, that we're focusing on today.
Okay. Well, it's interesting that you did that film, a few years ago, and it's so appropriate to what, was happening during the pandemic. So, Rodney, what about you?
I started out pretty much wanting to do creative and make things since I was a little baby. And my first love was music, and very early on I was making up little melodies and songs and banging on things and singing. And second love was filmmaking, but I didn't know it at the time. But we as a family went to the movies a couple of times a month, and it was always a special thing for me. And when we wanted to go see monster films or things like that back in the mid to late 60s, it was with my dad. He and I would go together. So there was this love of both of those things. And then there was, on top of that, technology and just learning about stuff. So by the time I was 12, I had built my first synthesizer and in my first little garage band. And basically, I laugh sometimes when friends of mine that I've known since I was 10 or 11, come by to visit, because when I bring them into my studio, which is on the first floor of my house, very similar to where my little play workspace was when I was a kid at my parents' house, I go, "Hey, come on in, let me show you something I'm working on." and I just love being creative. I also somewhere along the way developed a desire or want to help people, and I used to hold little consulting or counseling groups in fourth and fifth grade during lunchtime with the students. Like I would have them come sit down with me, and I would go, so what's troubling you? What problems are you having in your family? Can I help you with these? And so, you know, in the beginning, it was also I did it a lot through Christianity, because I was when I was a little kid a true 100% believer, and as I got older, got a little disillusioned with Catholicism, and started a path looking for some sort of a spirituality that made sense to my soul, and that's been a lifelong quest. But even as I did a little stint as a rock star late early 80s, early 90s, the songs that I was writing were all about things that mattered to me, you know, that were socially relevant, or problems I saw that I couldn't figure out how to solve. I try and solve them in a song. Or and then I ran a nonprofit that was called the Banner Project, which was an anti-violence, anti-drug program that worked with elementary school and middle school kids. And that's kind of where my connection to Vic sort of starts, in that I understand the work he did as a social worker, because I guess I would see a lot of the kids. You know, I didn't know Vic then, but I would see some of the kids that he might have worked with, or, you know, the types of young kids he would have worked with, either before or after he had met them. I would see them. I worked with some adjudicated kids, and basically introducing them to the arts, filmmaking, music. And then Vic and I met, I guess, 8 years ago. A mutual friend of ours who has since passed, Pecky, who was the woman who actually started the nonprofit that I worked for in the 90s. She thought that we both should meet because he was making films and I had a little studio. So that is when our paths crossed, and we decided to make Caregivers together, and we've been working on stuff ever since. And
Great. Well, you answered my next question there. I was going to ask what brought you together. But I'll just go to the next one, which is, could you give us a little overview of the film and, you know, what it's about?
Well,
Either or both of you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll both want to answer that. Actually, the most simple phraseology for it, which Rodney kind of put his finger on it, it's about sex and religion. And it's about really the impact, for the most part, the negative impact that Christianity and Judaism have traditionally had upon creating this sort of split that says the flesh is evil and the spirit is good. And I suppose what's kind of ironic about the film is that given this dichotomy and the really the tragic impact of it all, the traumatic impact of this sort of dividing the world into these simplistic forms, the irony is that the people we interview are deeply spiritual. They are people, even several of them are ordained. One is a rabbi, two are ordained Christian ministers. One is a particularly secular guy that just has a real spiritual affection and connection with nature. Another is a woman who's a sex educator, has great insight into this whole territory. So it's a diverse in that sense, but we're really having people with this deep spirituality talking about not only the harm that these traditional institutionalized religions have brought upon people at very deep levels, but also the healing possibilities of a spirituality that moves to wholeness, connection, appreciation of our total selves, and moves beyond this kind of compartmentalization and splitting that has been so harmful.
So did you have anything to add to that, Rodney?
Yes. Everything Vic said is right on. It's the film's about wholeness, I think, and how to bring about the mind, body, soul connection back to one, and how to get past all the rules, regulations, or you know, that were created when men got involved with the spirit, I guess. It's one way of saying it. I mean, as a kid, I did a year in Catholic school, and that was all I could handle was a year. But I used to get sent to the office because I would ask too many questions in religious class, but the questions I would ask I think are sort of at the root of our film. Like one of the questions was, I would go, so in the Bible it says Jesus rose on the third day, and yes, and the first person he went to was Mary, right? And he said, go forth and spread the word, I have risen, right? So how come she's not an apostle? Wouldn't she be the most important apostle? I mean, he came to her first, and then I would come to find out, according, in talking to people, that there actually was a book of Mary, but it didn't get turned into the Bible in the Nicene Council. And there you have sort of what the film is sort of about, because the flesh is bad. Oh, and who gives birth to the flesh is bad. So we're going to keep women out of this. And it just sets up a whole thing. And then, through making the film, learning about St. Augustine and his whole hang up and with sexuality is just, Freud would have, I know Freud only dealt with women, but he would have a field day if St. Augustine had gone to see her. That would be an interesting film.
Yeah.
But
So what year did you go to Catholic school?
That was fourth grade.
Oh, really? Yeah, I only survived a year too. I went first grade.
Oh, okay.
And the same scenario. My friend and I kept getting in trouble, and finally we were able to convince our parents to let us go to public school. But I did go to catechism for quite a few years after that. So why did you choose the format that you did for your film?
What do you mean? Say more about what do you mean the format? Like
the format or structure. Why did you choose that particular way of presenting it?
Well, let me say that we built the film structurally around the persons that we interviewed, and it's kind of bookended by an interview with a really knowledgeable and out-of-the-box minister that goes by the nickname Rev Bev, Reverend Beverly Dale. And she kind of sets up the historical dilemma that we were beginning to talk about a little bit, how the early church was not anti-body. It came about around the 3rd to 4th century, around the shift of the hierarchy being controlled by some of these revered men. And she sets up sort of the historical piece, and then she ends this with a poem about sex is good, kind of the unexpected development. And so then there are interwoven in sort of a conversational manner the various themes of the film with the interviewed people. But what we realized in making the film very early on is that a lot of it is, to use one of the beautiful terms that M, who was in the film, used, ineffable, unable to fully express certain concepts in words. And so we moved into bringing art of various kinds into the film. Animation being very strong. We found actually Rodney brought in a young woman that he had worked with in class. He teaches at some of the universities, and this young woman, Amy Patron, provided us, we met with her frequently and talked about, well, how would you express this in animation? Rodney has brought in a lot of his own original music plus music from others. I brought in a choreographer that I know very well, who created a small dance ensemble to express some of these amazing concepts. We can talk a little bit later about just how that was enacted. And poetry, original poetry. We found that a lot of the people we were interviewing were in fact quite artistic themselves. And so we didn't have to go very far to find the poetry that they themselves has written. So really the structure of the film is around the interviews, but then the elaboration into this ineffable or this beyond words comes in art. And so in a sense, it's not your typical documentary. You know, it's not so much left brain in terms of analytical prose and description of words, but it moves really into right brain expressions of the incredible deep thoughts that are there, and does it in I think of a spirited and sometimes humorous way.
Okay.
What do you think, Rodney, about the structure? Do you think that is that a fair analysis?
I think that, I mean, one of the things I would say is in the films that I make with Vic, one of Vic's structural guidelines is he wants the story to be told by the people we interview. So we don't, while we're making the film, we try and limit the amount of narration or even sometimes direction. We really want it to unfold from them. And, you know, in starting to edit the film together, one of the things is Vic was referencing very early on is that all of the images that we were picking for cutaways or that we would use for B-roll or just didn't work because, you know, like, again, the person that Vic is talking about in the film, you might, one of the people he was talking about was the naturalist who is polyamorous. And every time I tried to find an image that would express that, it just seemed patriarchal or pornographic. And it just didn't work. It didn't embody the spirit in the way that he was talking about. Or when any of the speakers were talking, everything when I was looking for a way of visually representing something they were saying, it just didn't work. Because it was, that image was so grounded in our understanding of Western culture as Americans, Europeans watching the film, we'd immediately go to that idea of what that image means. So we, you know, Vic and I talked, and like you said, we worked with a choreographer and a animator, and as I was editing it, I kept trying to think about how, well, the people in the film that we're interviewing are talking about a new way of seeing things, a new way of seeing reality. So that's what I kept trying to do with the images that we saw, was trying to create a new way of looking at something or a different way or shifting perspective. And, but also trying to keep the spiritual, a spiritual grounding throughout the whole storytelling. And I think the music did that. Vic also talked about that there's songs in there. When right where we were near the end of the film, I was like, how am I going to score this thing? I have no idea. It just doesn't seem like a scoreable film. Like, how do I write music for this? And then it clicked on me. Oh, songs. I don't need score. I could just use songs. And then I just went through my library and found a bunch of songs. I had already had them, a lot of them, and I found the right versions. And then some friends of mine whose album I had produced a while ago, this group called Ants on a Log, they do music for kids. They had done a whole album of transgender songs for kids. And I just went through that record and I just started pulling, okay, that song works. Oh, that song works. And I placed them in, and it was amazing how it just sort of came together at the end with all of the way the music and the images started working together.
Okay. So why do you guys think that spirituality and sexuality are important topics right now?
Oh, I can I take that one first?
Yeah,
Rick?
please.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we collectively have just gone through a international trauma with the pandemic, and I think that uh, anything that can give us a sense of healing and a sense of connection and um, you know, I mean, I thought this would have been valuable prior to the pandemic because I think our culture is in need of healing around these issues. I mean, if you want to get into an argument with someone, bring up these two subjects. I mean, all we had to do was throw in money and politics in there, and we could just have a big brawl. Like, but I think that without us learning to be whole beings, we are kind of doomed to live in the shadows. Like, I jokingly say, to go to any small town in America, and what do you see? You see a church, a strip club, and a drugstore, and a bar. Church,
Gas
strip
station.
club, gas station. Yeah, so you can get around to all of them, and it seems a little weird to me that there's that they are in some ways they're part of the human experience, yet they're so separated. They're so like, and yet, how are you human without, how can you separate your physicalness, your flesh from your spirit and be whole? How is that possible? Yet, you know,
Yeah, that's really a wonderful metaphor. So if you have the strip club and the church fighting together, then what better connection can you have than are some drugs to
get through it.
mediate the distress that all of that builds up.
Mhm.
That's a great metaphor.
Okay, so
One thing. Let me add one other thing to Rodney's earlier statement about the structure, and that is that the two films that we've made together in the last 5 or 6 years, Caregivers and and this one, Eros and Awe, Angels and Saints, Eros and Awe, they're really driven. The interviews themselves are stories. They are portraits. They are people's life experiences. They're not abstract. The narration is really quite personal. And in this, at least 3 of the participants talk about the trauma that they've experienced sexually in growing up, and it's also connected to the religious institutions or the ideologies that are part of those institutions. And the rabbi, although he and several of the others were certainly not traumatized, he specializes as a pastoral or rabbinical counselor in helping people that have had to deal with this sort of perversity. So those narrations, they're not talked about in great detail, but there are enough allusions to them that you can understand the hurt that some people have had, and they're representative of what we believe is occurring or has occurred currently and historically.
so in the course of making this film, what were the aha moments or things that you learned as a part of the process?
Well, the thing that that just floored me was when we were doing an interview with Chris Page. They were talking about Native Americans have 26 or 27 terms for gender, and I did not know that. And in the culture, in First Nation culture, those were the wise ones. Those were the sages, the people who embodied both genders, or some aspect of both genders, were the the sages in the community. Those were the ones that people went to because they felt they were closest to the spirit, because the spirit is both male and female. The spirit is and unknowable. The spirit is whole, and so there was this way in which those were the people who were the powerful ones, and that blew my mind because it's the antithesis of what we know in Western culture or in Christianity, and I started doing all this research into the two spirit people, is what they're called, and it was pretty powerful and amazing. And I was like, how did I not know this? And I was talking to a friend of mine. He goes, "Did you ever see that movie there's a movie from the early 70s about I can't even remember the name of it. It was a Western. It was really popular, but there was a two-spirit person in that film." I go, I didn't even really get that, and it just opened up all these these images of Native Americans that I've seen, in documentaries, or that is actually was a way that people were referred to. That there were 27 terms. I thought, wow, that's so forward thinking.
And yet it's probably a very ancient
Yeah.
perception that is a gift to many people that are not a part of those cultures as we learn about it. I love the way you stated that question, Kate, and that is things that we learned, because there was so much that we picked up. Rodney has just given you an example. Another theme that kept coming up, at least from several of the people, was this theme about boxes and how constrained people are in terms of how they identify themselves. And again, Chris, but I also want to say something about Nick. Chris talks about a different terminology that is meaningful to them. Chris identifies as otherwise, with a capital O and a capital W, one word, otherwise. Chris acknowledges that the LGBTQIA is meaningful for many people, and as we are very respectful of people's choices if they want to use those categories. But Chris felt that they did not represent where they were, and that is that something much more intangible, much more out of the box was what they needed. And so that was a really fascinating learning. And related to that was the interview with Nick Evans. We were talking about Chris Page, but Nick Evans talks about his own identification, not so much on the linear line of heterosexual, homosexual, and where do you fall on that linear spectrum, so to speak. But he talks about a multi-axial understanding, something that, and there's a wonderful visual in the film. I'm using sort of the motions of this. It's sort of like it moves around. It's not linear. That's too simplistic. And he weaves into this the notion of nature and how Nick is a geologist, and he finds within the science of his work a deeply meaningful sense of order and of beauty and of awe. And so combining all of these elements really kind of takes us out of the rather narrow way in which things are talked about, whether it's spirituality or sexuality, and how do we bring that together. So these are the quality of some of the people we interviewed, that they were mind expansive, and we had the benefit, Rodney and I, of learning from them. They can probably express this much better than I am right now. In fact, I think that in the film you'll see how well they express all this. But this is what I was able to take out of the experience, and I hope others will as well.
Yes. So how have audiences responded to the film so far? I know that this is a difficult and controversial subject. Even, people that are willing to be broad-minded in some other areas are, sometimes fairly closed in this particular area. So how have audiences been responding?
Anya, why don't you jump on that one?
Well, so far so good. I mean, I would say that we've been screening a lot to the choir. Our audience has been I would say people who are already open to what we are discussing. But so far the reviews have been really strong. People found it informational, educational, somewhat challenging. Haven't had anybody say anything directly to us that that they did. No one said they didn't like it, and no one has said that we were I guess blasphemers for making it. If I was going to say, use a word like that. So it's been great. I mean, the reviews we've gotten so far have been awesome, and people are responding well. We have we were just accepted to the Chicago Film Festival, and we have some film festivals coming up in the fall that are going to be in person. So it'll be very interesting to see how it is received. Yeah, I'm really excited to see what questions and thoughts people have from it. I mean, it's funny because when I show it to some people, they're like, yeah, this is fine, but it's not that radical. And I showed to other people like, oh, that's the most radical thing I've ever seen. So,
Yeah. So what drew the two of you to tackle, something that you knew was going to be controversial?
I owe that to Vic. I often say I am, my company, Melody Vision, I work with a lot of different people working on a lot of different projects. Clients come in and partner with me to work. Vic always surprises me as a 70-something straight man who can come up with these ideas that I go, well, no one's ever thought of doing that before. Wow, I would have thought that, okay, sure, we'll go down that path. And for me, anything that looks at a way for us to better ourselves and to be whole and to be I'm willing to dig into and try and tell that story. That's like just part of my personal artistic and also the mission for my company too, is to try and tell those stories that can. I know it's a grandiose thing to say and maybe a little pretentious, but those stories that can change the world. So
Great.
yeah, and then on top of that, the other thing I would add that really is again, I not to harp on it too much, but both Vic and I being straight men making this film is also speaks to that it's important that we find ways of standing up for things that don't necessarily affect us, because in reality it all affects us. Like, I am often surprised and disturbed by the fact that that so many people don't stand up for other people's rights. And I don't mean that I don't see people marching and stuff like that, but it's very rare that you find someone really taking up a cause for something that doesn't seemingly have anything to do with them. And but that is what but that is what it means to be.
That is true, but my reason for it was that it actually does have something to do
right.
with
Yes.
all of us.
Right. I wanted to add that same thing, Kate, and that is that it's not about helping so much as being helped, that everyone has helped by the discussion. And the film features people who identify in many different ways, from heterosexual
Mhm.
to gay to trans.
Mhm.
And as I mentioned, otherwise, it's not fitting in any of the boxes. In fact, a couple of people don't use the usual names.
Mhm.
But I think that for myself, making a film needs to be about something that hasn't been said before, or not said to my satisfaction, bringing out a new perception, at least the perception I have. I don't want to be presumptuous and call it the truth, but the reality as I understand it, not usually through my own words, but through the people that we select to voice it, who can often say it so much more eloquently than perhaps I'm able to say it. And so in both of the films we worked on, we really featured the stories of these people and let them unfold in the telling of their trauma, of their joys, of their heartache, of their awe, the whole mix of all of that. So this is not necessarily the best way to create a big financial, cultural, successful film. So I'm still waiting to see how this film does, because it does tread in very controversial areas of sex and religion, and has the audacity to say that these two areas can and belong together in the healthiest sense. So we don't know if it's going to be like a niche film, or if the festivals will begin to give it a little bit of cred. We are glad that the one of our first ones we applied to, the Chicago Independent Film Festival, has selected as one of theirs, and we're anticipating some others. So it's a bit of an adventure. An adventure is going on a trail and you don't know exactly where it's going to lead. So I'm enjoying the adventure, or the ride, so to speak. And Rodney's been absolutely a pleasure to work with, at least 99% of the time.
So considering that, this topic, there's a lot of taboo around discussing sexuality and spirituality, especially together. And considering that many of our politicians and religious leaders who, have the loudest voices talking about things like homosexuality, promiscuity, adultery, or sexual identity, are often, found to be, compromised or exploitative in the areas themselves.
That's right.
How does that play into your film and your ideas that you're?
Well, it plays very much into what we are encouraging people to talk about. So I'm glad you're helping us talk about that with your question. And it's a depiction of the contradiction that exists all over the place, where people are very two-faced because they have two faces. They have this split, this idea splits from this. And so, I guess I began to be very aware of it growing up as an adolescent. I grew up in East Tennessee, in the Bible Belt, and to see the piety of folks and how we were on Sundays, and then to see how we treated each other, the backseat of the car or wherever, there was this sort of like denial and suppression of the natural being of one's sexuality, and so this confusion is something that runs very deep through our culture. And we see these spokespersons all over the place spouting out one thing, and then it's revealed that their life story is also something quite different. And neither one is probably their truest selves. It's like faces of themselves and the confusion that that represents. So we, I mean, one of the most horrible examples was this situation in Atlanta where the very pious religious right-wing character, a human being. I need to credit the fact that this is a true human being who was confused, but terribly so, and then goes on an attack of the women in the massage parlors.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is one of the most graphic. They're not all quite that horrible, but it's this. He talked. This is he talked about this inner struggle and this battle within himself, and he then acted it out.
Yeah.
And so we see
It's
manifestations
a
of that.
very bad solution.
Yes, I mean, a horrific way that it played itself out. And so many of the politicians, are spouting out what they think their followers want to hear, and that to some degree they may believe in. But we discover, because of the spotlight on their lives, that there's often a very different story.
Yes. And, bringing up that example that you gave, I've heard people react to it in all kinds of different ways. Like, still, even with the horrible outcome, I've heard people, talk about those massage parlors shouldn't be there. Those women shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Blaming the victim.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
I think the film at its core goes it speaks to all of what we're all talking about, which is wholeness. It's if we're not whole, then parts of ourselves become perverted. And when I say perverted, I mean that by we hide them. We put them away in the darkness. We put them in the shadows, and eventually they that will hurt us. If we're not, whole, how can we? If we're not whole and healed, we can't be a well-oiled machine. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a really good analogy for that, but we can't operate as fully functional human beings that are connected to the source. We can't. We're now trying to keep a part of ourselves hidden away, but that we're going to act on in secret or whatever, and it hurts us, and then that hurts the culture. It hurts us all. And so I think but I think the challenge of why people don't want to talk about it, I've come to this you asked one of the things that we learned in making the film. One of the things I learned is, as progressive as I think I am, or claim to be, or want to be, I still have room to be challenged, and being challenged is uncomfortable. And I think one of the things that is most it's one of the most difficult parts of our culture is that we don't like being challenged. We don't like being uncomfortable. And so if I feel that I know who you are when I first meet you, if I can put you in a box, and then I'm going to be comfortable when I meet you. But if I have to meet you as open and you're open, that can be uncomfortable. And we're constantly discovering who each other is. That would be the best possible scenario, but that would mean I'd have to come whole and you'd have to come whole, and all of us would have to come whole in order to be able to be in the uncomfortableness of not knowing. And so I think that's what the film speaks to ultimately, is the more whole we are, the more connected we can be, and the more vulnerable we can be, and the more connected we can be.
Yes, it's definitely, as you guys have pointed out previously, very complex as far as, people coming to an understanding around these issues. And
Well, the paradox that I think Rodney's also alluding to, and the film does, is that the very thing which society has weaponized and made into such a negative thing, which is sexuality or the flesh, is indeed the source of healing. It is the very thing that when it's acknowledged and one understands the beauty, and one does that with respect and with boundaries and with kindness, then that is the very medicine and the healing that brings about the wholeness and the awe that comes out of that. So this is a central paradox that we hear from our angels and saints.
Yes, very appropriate name for your. So I have a question that's kind of a little bit off topic for both of you, but I've been asking all my guests for a while now. What has surprised you most about life so far?
Oh. Well, I'm waiting for Rodney to speak up, but if he doesn't, I'll jump in.
I'm thinking, what has surprised me most?
Well, as Rodney said, I'm in that 70 something. In fact, my birthday is coming up this weekend. I'll be 76.
Wow, happy birthday.
So I think what has surprised me, and I began to get this surprise actually as a young adult, because I think I was raised in a fairly ideological, repressive, religious background. But what surprised me was how magnificent the object world is, the world of objects. And that means nature, that means people. And that if one uses one's senses, if I use my senses to reflect on and meditate and honor the object in front of me, it could be a tree, it could be a beautiful vase, it could be a beautiful woman, or it could be a child. Whatever I put respectful attention to. Nowadays, this is being called mindfulness, but I don't think that was the term as I was discovering this. But if I give all due respect and spend some time honoring that, its beauty comes up. And from that beauty, a kind of sense of awe, of wonder. It's like, to me, that was a great surprise and breakthrough for me. And art, I think, is one of the truest vehicles or mechanisms to get there.
Great.
Yeah. Mine is similar, I guess, to Vic's. I would say the thing that is the most surprising to me is our human capacity to destroy and create. Like that we have this immense ability to hurt each other and tear things down and rip them apart, and we have this unbelievable capacity to build connection, to love, and to create. And the complexity of both of those things sometimes makes my brain and heart hurt.
Ooh, yeah, definitely.
Because it seems like there is, as long as we're here, that journey is going to continue. That there is no answer to, because it is what it is to be human.
Yes, definitely. So we're getting close to the end of our time. If you could leave the listeners with one thought from today's show, what would you want that to be, each of you?
Rodney, I took the shot at the last one, so.
Well, I would say, well, we'd love for you to go to our website.
Oh, wait a minute. That's the next question.
Oh, okay. All right. So what would I love to leave them? I would love, I mean, to explore the world with an open heart, vulnerability, and uh, uh, look for connection wherever you can find it.
Okay, great.
I think I would want the audience, and particularly anyone in the film who feels that they have been injured by the ideologies, whether they be the ideology of their religion or of a materialistic rat race culture, that there is healing in the examples and stories of these people that we call angels and saints. And we came up with that title because they are the least likely people in our society to be considered angels and saints. When you hear the frankness of their discussions of sexuality and who they are the opposite, really. And yet, and that is of the usual concept of angels and saints, but in the truest sense, they are so incredibly sacred, and there's healing for people in the audience that, and I think everyone has to some degree suffered from our Western culture.
Great. So my next question is, if listeners would like to contact you or find out more about the film or what you do, how would they do that?
Well, we have a website, which Rodney was starting to mention, and the easiest form of the website is www.aseafilm.com. That ASEA is Angels, Saints, Arrows, All. aseafilm.com. And there's a lot of information about the film, and it's not yet officially ready for distribution. We're still going through the copyright and the last hoops that you go through, with the legal aspects of all this. All of that's routine, but we anticipate within 2 or 3 months that it'll be available for sale and to be marketable at that point. We are doing some preview screenings still of the final product. If people want to review the film with the idea of having, say, a virtual screening, which we've had several of at this point, it is available on those terms on a non-monetary basis at this point.
Yeah,
Just
if
be
they
in
want,
touch with us.
or if they'd like to host a screening in person, yeah, reach out
Yes.
to us. We'd love to share the film with you.
Mhm.
Okay. And do you have anything to add to that, Rodney, as far as contact?
You can find me at the film, or my other way of finding me is at www.melodyvision.com, which is my company website, and all the information to contact me is there. So yeah.
Okay.
And let me just say, I can be contacted if you look right here at my name and make it into one word and keep it all lower, not capitals, VICCOMPHER at Comcast.net.
Okay.
And both of our contact information is on the Angels and Saints website.
Okay, and if you forget any of that, you can go to the radio website, which is soulfireradio.com. Click on guests, scroll down to their names, and that information that they just gave is listed there. So
Thank you.
thank you, Vic and Rodney, for being here today and talking about this. I'm sure it'll be, an interesting topic for many of the audience. And what I saw of the film was quite interesting. So I recommend that listeners do check it out. So we have another great show planned for next week. That'll be Tuesday, August 13th and 3 p.m. So we've gone a little over time. So I'm just going to say bye for now. Thanks
Thank
again.
you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Soulfire Wisdom with Kate Olson. We hope you enjoyed the show. If we made you laugh, brightened your day, or sparked a new thought, we have succeeded in our mission. Join us next time when we'll share more secrets and truths and all the magic of transformation that is the journey to Soulfire Wisdom. Always remember, be fierce in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.